We are live.
And we're live! Alright, hey everybody, this is Mike and Chris. I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And we're here at our Roundtable monthly podcast for all things 3D. Today is July 23rd, 2014, and we have some exciting studio guests joining us from all over the United States and even from the Netherlands. Why don't we go around and introduce ourselves?
So we'll virtually go from the left, which is Brad. So Brad, you go first.
How you doing? My name's Brad Hill. You might have not heard about me because I'm not I'm not as well known as some of the other people here, but I've just been doing into 3D for a few years. Been pretty heavy into the rep scene, and have recently started working on some open source SLA printer projects, and I have a printer that I'm going to try releasing. Called the Little RP, which is it's also been known as a Little SLA or a Little DLP, but it's known as a Little RP now, and it's aimed at being, an affordable open source SLA printer. So just kind of like a standardized platform for people to get started in that realm, because I think that level of, or that style of printing is going to just become more and more popular.
Definitely. Yeah, and we've had a chance. Brad actually joined us at our Central Coast 3D user group meeting last week, and kind of showed us his printer because he lives about 2 hours away in Santa Barbara, and thing really spits out some impressive parts. I mean, for being completely designed from the ground up on yourself, I mean, you just must be pretty proud.
Yeah, and what was funny about that, Brad, is that when you came into our user group and had the discussion, I think people were interested, but as soon as we ripped out those parts, man, people just perked up and said,
like I totally forgot to put the parts out, and then everyone's like, yeah, it seems kind of interested, and then they look at the parts and they're like, oh my god, like.
Yeah, so that was really fun. Okay, so let's move on to Erik, please. And
Okay.
you are from where?
I'm from the Netherlands, so actually that's where.
That's California, right?
Right. No. Actually, it's in Europe. It's a pretty small country, but we're doing interesting stuff here, I would say. Actually, I'll start from the start because in 2008 I discovered the RepRap project, and I was completely fascinated by it, and so that started to become the thing that I was completely immersed in. I didn't do much else. I started traveling around a lot, also talking about the RepRap project, and after a while, I found a couple of friends in a fab lab in Utrecht, in the Netherlands, where we started collaborating on making 3D printers in groups. So we started doing group builds and learned a lot from each other. And from doing that, we discovered that the workshop was really nice. We had a lot of knowledge exchange, and we learned to make eventually a working RepRap. But it was pretty challenging. So doing another workshop was at some point discussed, but it was not really feasible. But then one of the co-founders of Ultimaker right now came in, and he walked in the door with a laser cut system that is the precursor of the Ultimaker. And we got really excited because it was a blank slate, and we could put a lot of very interesting concepts in there, which we were experimenting with the Darwins at the time. It was before the Mendel stage. And well, we could just start over in a way, so that was really good, and we could make a machine that was more portable and very easy to calibrate and durable and fast. And so those were very nice properties. At the time, it was just a project, and at some point we got so much interest in there, we put up a blog post, and so many people wanted to actually get a kit, and so that's why we founded a company, and that was Ultimaker. So that's a little bit of the background. I'm sure there's more to tell, but if there are questions, then I could just respond to that.
Yeah, well, Erik, as you know, we've interviewed you before, so a lot of the questions and responses we've already heard. So, but Steve or Brad, if you've got any questions for Erik, or we can just move on, and maybe something else will come up. So. No? Nobody? Okay. Let's just move in.
Well, the Ultimaker is an amazing machine, an amazing company, and you definitely have helped pioneer, pave the way for a lot of these other print companies, especially in the FDM or FFF market. And definitely a lot of support for you up at the Maker Faire this year. I saw your booth, and man, was it jam-packed. A lot of exciting. You're right.
Yeah, always nice to see when people are excited. Of course, at Maker Faire, a lot of people already know about 3D printing and know about Ultimaker, but it's always really nice to also see people who are new to 3D printing, seeing jaws drop. That's really, it's really one of the reasons to do all this. So
I saw some models. They were big. They were like real big models, and I see even behind you, I see some pretty big, like a Statue of Liberty, like
right. Yeah. It's a pretty old one, but it's still a nice one. Yeah. We brought that in 2011 to Maker Faire New York. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Or actually, we printed it in the hotel room.
That's the nice thing about 3D printing. You can pretty much do it anywhere. Well, as you know, Eric, I've got an Ultimaker 3, and after getting it tuned up a little bit, it's an awesome printer. And too bad Brian isn't here today. He actually hurt himself in the gym, so he's in the emergency room. So, but he was telling me he feels that the Ultimaker 3 is an awesome printer, and he says that it kind of sort of compares well to the Fortis series. You got some competition. So, on that, let's move on to Steve.
Hey, my name's Steve Hernandez. Not exactly sure how to describe myself. Long-time maker. I've been into CNC for a long time. I got into FFF and FDM printing somewhat early, around 2008, 2009 timeframe. I wrote some software for both FDM printing and for SLA DLP printing. It's called Creation Workshop. I've got a blog. I've got a forum where people can come together, the Build Your Own SLA forum, which helps show people how to put together different DLP and SLA-based machines. I'm moving into laser, and I'm moving into SLS, as well as powder-based printers. And I just generally like to help people cross-pollinate ideas in the community. So.
Yeah, well, Steve, we definitely thank you for all your contributions as well, because I just started using Creation Workshop with my little RP machine that Brad made. So yeah, and the software is just like super user friendly, and I mean it's just amazing that like you're offering it as a free tool out there, open source.
Oh, thanks.
You got to put, what you need to do is put your Bitcoin your Bitcoin address right on the.
I should. I actually had a PayPal link on there, and then I took it off, but I should probably put it back on in my Bitcoin as well.
Yeah,
I'm definitely interested in trying to add a lot of new features. So actually, version 25 is going to be coming out here soon, and that's got a lot of neat new tools to help you do like exposure testing, so you don't have to do so many prints just trying to figure it out when you're initially setting up your machine, as well as a couple other interesting features that help you with models and meshes.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I just started using it. Actually, here's my first SLA model right here. I don't know if you can see that.
Nice.
That's my first SLA model that I ever printed, and yeah, it actually is I mean, aside from it not, maybe it was a resin issue or something, I don't know, but it turned out pretty good. I printed it yesterday, and I mean, I got the printer, was it last Wednesday? And really the first day I messed with it was on Friday and yesterday. So, I mean, for
cool.
2 days, maybe an hour at a time, so a couple hours of messing around, never done SLA printing, have to learn all about the resins and clean.
Right. It's kind of a steep learning curve, but you get used to it pretty quick. So.
Yeah, it's a process I've learned. With FDM or FFF, it's kind of like you put it, it's like the easy bake oven, it's set it and forget it. With SLA, you kind of have to have a pre-processing area, for decontaminating the, build things.
You got to put on your hazmat suit.
Yeah. You got to get the rubber gloves on, and you got to get the squeegee out. And
yeah, it's definitely
sorts of things.
A dedicated area for your printer. You can't just throw it in a corner like a FDM printer. You have to have kind of like a way to contain the resin, because you don't want to get it all over everything. You don't want to get it on your hands. you know. So and then you have to have a post process so you can clean the part, you know. So
right, some sort of ethanol bath, and then
yeah.
even like a UV kind of oven, or at least a few UV flashlights that you can harden the parts up.
I always love stockpiling on things like alcohol. You know, I'm at Target, you know, with a cart, you know, with 20
cart full of vodka. Yeah. Okay.
I found that Target actually has
what is this guy doing?
Target has 94%. I remember.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, it's
which is very reasonably priced.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I actually bought some alcohol 99% on Amazon as well. And Brad, thank you. I went to Costco the other day and I got your box of gloves as well. But gloves at Costco. So thank you.
One thing you could do too, I think you can get 99% isopropyl at like automotive stores. It's called ISO Heat. It's like a fuel line additive or something.
Is it really necessary, or is 90%? I mean, like, what does the 99% give you? That the 90%?
Purity.
Well, I don't know if that's the point of this conversation, but.
Oh, it just smokes cleaner. You're saying?
No. Well, if you wash resin prints with IPA, the more water there is in it, you can end up with spots on your prints. So you can either do like a final rinse in acetone, which gets rid of that, or you could use a higher quality IPA.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to our news items. I tried to pick things that were related to printers, since we're going to be talking about HP shortly. So the first item there was MatterFab is creating an affordable metal 3D printer. This has kind of been, at least for us, the holy grail of 3D printing, to be able to actually extrude metal.
Yeah. Well, this is a powder-based SLS style printer that MatterFab's working on. So you got to have, you're still going to have a clean room environment or some processing area that you can deal with these materials. So, but really interesting article for anybody that wants to check it out. The notes will be in the podcast liners, and it's a TechCrunch article. So if you go to techcrunch.com, TechCrunch.com, you can maybe search for MatterFab, and they just go into detail about a metal 3D printing, affordable metal 3D printer. And I think it's still pretty much in its kind of demo prototyping stage. They definitely don't have like a production-ready machine, but still pretty amazing that you know, somebody else is out there working on it other than the big dogs like EOS or you know, 3D systems.
Erik, what do you think about it?
Well, it's definitely interesting to see actual pictures of prints, because you see a lot of printers popping up that don't really have anything really to show for. So you see a nice machine, basically. And so in this case, I actually see some items there, which is a positive indication. I know that sintering metal like this is a pretty tough thing to do, because you actually need, for example, inert gas in there, because otherwise you could very easily get the thing catching on fire. Even a single electrostatic spark could ignite the whole thing, because metal is very reactive, and it can very easily, if it's a fine powder, which you actually need for sintering metal, you will very easily put it on fire. So in terms of safety, this is a pretty tricky thing to get right. And then this inert gas is also very important, because otherwise you'll be burning metal more than that you're sintering. And then you also need to make sure that the chamber can reach very high temperatures. And what I'm seeing is actually that there's for example, a cable guard, which seems to be out of polymers. And I would say that those would be melting if you actually elevate the chamber to the temperatures you need for example, low melting point alloys, for example, aluminum with something else. So there are some things that are not in there, which definitely make it easier to make such a machine. But on the other hand, I would think that you're missing those for a good production setup.
Yeah, I've been trying to share on my screen, but I don't know, maybe I'm the master or something, or maybe I have too many monitors. But if you've got it up on one of your sites, Google does have the ability to screen share, so if you wouldn't mind popping it up in the other news items. I apologize for not having that ability here. Here we're talking about an article, and if you're watching this, you don't get to see it, so you'll have to go out to the link yourself.
Is it the 3Ders MatterFab affordable metal 3D printer? I've got it up here on my screen if you'd like to see it.
Yeah. Oh, actually, Erik just put it up. There we go.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah. Again, I think it's it's definitely a step in the right direction. This is the holy grail. A lot of people, definitely want to see this. They want metal parts. I think for early iterations you can get away with plastic, but for final metal parts,
Right, especially like machine quality parts as well. Something that could be used in a final product and not just a prototype.
Sure.
Brad, you want to chime in?
I mean, it seems interesting. I mean, one of the things that you notice from the video is it looks like they're relatively, have enough resources that maybe they'll actually end up with a product. It's not like, I think one of the other stories you read is when you search for like this technology, like it's like 17-year-old is going to sell a metal 3D printer, on Kickstarter, and it's just.
Yeah.
Like, really?
I would say there are a lot of challenges in getting this right, and I know for a fact that, for example, there's a company in Eindhoven, close to where I live, that is called Additive Industries, and they're making a metal sintering system. But what I'm looking at, if I'm guessing correctly, what they're trying to do, they have a lot more knowledge about getting, for example, parts out there that have the right dimensions, and that is actually a tricky thing to do with these metal powders. And also a good way to spread the metal. And then there's also a lot of patent issues because a lot of the IP is still protected. So I'm not sure whether you can work around them easily, because there are just a few ways to, for example, lay down a layer of powder, for example.
Yeah. So that'll be really interesting as well. Is are they going to be able to avoid the patents, or have they really looked into it? So.
I mean, I'd feel more comfortable if I mean, you think the next step in available, I don't know, you call them prosumer, of these SLS printers would be a nylon based. It's kind of weird to jump from nothing to metal, but we don't really have the existence of even additional options for nylon printers, and I know people are working on that, but I think that there's a natural progression there, and I don't know, we're kind of jumping it. I don't know.
I wonder actually if there are better ways to get at the metal part. For example, there's the bronze fill material, which is 80% metal, and you can already, if you print directly, you can get a very metallic item out of it. And then I was wondering whether it's similar to a green part that you could also print with some technologies, and then put that into an oven at a very high temperature, burn away the polymer inside, and get the actual metal part, a smaller part, of course. So that might be another way. And of course, people have been casting from just regular FDM type printed parts. So I know for sure that there are some people who've Ultimaker printed some part for their motorcycle, for example, send it to a casting facility and get the aluminum part back. So those are also good options, because both ABS and CLA burn out pretty cleanly. So and printing is very cheap, so losing the model itself is not a problem. It's okay to have one-off molds.
Well, I'll get to you in a minute, Brad. Well, I was hoping Brian would be here, because one of the things that he sent me was some beta casting resin for SLA printers, and so I'm very interested in trying that out soon. So there's another option in heating metal with some detailed price. Brad, have you worked with this yet? The casting resin?
Oddly enough, they have not sent me any. They are supposed to. I've been playing with Maker Juice's version of their casting resin, which may actually be a good choice for larger prints too, because I think it's probably about 8 times cheaper. It may not be as, I don't know the performance differences between the two, but maybe for, say, like fine jewelry, maybe something where the made solid has better performance. But if you're dealing with, mechanical parts or things that are on a larger scale, I think that the price probably will outweigh those differences. I mean, that's a potential issue too, as far as direct casting of parts like that, where you don't have to make a mold. Would certainly compete with. I mean, from a price standpoint, I mean, if it's say for $1,000, you can do direct casting with an SLA printer versus, this Matterfab, I think is the metal printing company. I mean, you look at the machine; it's going to be expensive, right?
Affordable is such a relative term.
It really is, because the prices of the DLP resins have really come down so much over the past few years, and now it's actually a little bit cheaper, depending on your resin choice, to print DLP SLA-based models than it is with FFF or FDM, NBS or PLA.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next item, which was the Dynamo 3D. And again, if somebody would help me out and bring that link up, and maybe we can share the page, I'd appreciate it. Anybody have any input on that?
I'm sure. Yeah. I completely recognize the
like a video.
mechanical gantry, but also the outside frame. It's directly. I would say.
Ours. It was my first thought, Eric, is that looks really familiar to us, and.
But they improved it. It prints like 4 times faster.
Actually, if you look at the Ultimaker's high end, it's about the same. So I think it's a little ironic. Plus, they don't. Is that the same LCD screen, Eric?
Yes, it's probably. I see the button. It's spaced at the same distance as the four-line display. Yeah, so it's probably similar. Yeah. So in a way, it's recognition of that the design is a very good design for high speed, and so but it's always a trade-off, the speed and quality that you want. There's always a trade-off between them. So usually we don't brag about the maximum linear speed that you can print at, because that's not a realistic thing to talk about. And so
Eric, I'm glad that you mentioned obviously having one, because you have to extrude the plastic at a certain rate, and it's very difficult to get anything really fast, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense. So it's a very good point.
Mm-hmm. And the only difference that I cannot really explain what they're doing, they may have just photoshopped it away, but there's no bottom tube there. But I don't see a very big extruder lashed on top of it. That is a direct extrusion system.
Go ahead and share your screen on that so our audience can.
I will.
You can actually use your cursor to point at things, and you'll see the.
I will. Yeah. So there it is. Are you seeing it now?
We are.
Okay. So well, at least there's no bottom tube displayed. So either they're doing something different, but if there's a direct extrusion system and a motor moving on the moving head, then it would be a lot heavier. So I'm guessing that there should be a bottom tube. So they're probably using photoshopped images.
How funny. I don't know if you're aware of this, Eric, but you can magnify your screen if you go up to the hamburger, which is up here. Can you see my cursor? Click on the hamburger, and then you can go to.
It should be magnified already now, right?
It's starting to be.
Yeah. Try a little bit. What do you have right now? Normally I find.
Yeah. That's perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
So the things you see right here are mostly renderings, I think.
Yeah.
And outlandish colors, in my opinion. I really like the stark white of the Ultimaker, so this is, in my opinion, very garish.
Well, this is mostly a copy of the Ultimaker original. If you look at the Z gantry, that has been improved already in the Ultimaker 2 design. And also, I'm guessing that there's no heated bed in there, but I haven't really completely read everything. But I would say that that's a very useful feature to have right now. For being able to remove parts and for having less warping, being able to print bigger parts. It's, I would say, a pretty essential feature.
And a lot of people don't realize this, even though you can print PLA with an unheated bed. A heated bed makes it so much easier for adherence and also removing it, especially removing it. And I think, Eric, you use glue sticks as well, but sometimes it's like glue, and it's very difficult, and I've got lots of scars on my hands from gouging myself and trying to remove a part. So, yeah, totally agree with you, and that's a good feature on the Ultimaker too.
Yeah, no more blue tape usually. I hardly use blue tape anymore, so that's nice. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we're all in agreement that this is a rip-off of the Ultimaker 2, or actually not even the Ultimaker 2. So let's move on to the next
original. Yeah.
Unless, Steve, you have something to...
No, well, I was just going to say one of the other advantages of having a heated bed is, it allows you to print a lot of other sorts of materials as well, such as nylon that has quite a high warping factor when you actually start to extrude it. I did some experiments with nylon printing, and it was tough to keep it attached to the bed, even with the heated bed. So one of the things that I've been looking into here in the future is making some modifications to my Mendel Max 2 to actually put it in the full enclosure to have a heated chamber enclosure.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing as well. And plus, I think the next item we're talking about, and there's a few other Chinese printers that are coming out with it fully enclosed. But a lot of things that I hear about is that these are the heated enclosure is still under patent from Stratasys.
Is it? I wasn't aware. Oh.
Or at least that's what comes up in the forums. I haven't actually done a patent search to determine that. So.
Well, I think I'll be pretty safe if I just build one for me and not try to sell it. So.
Yeah, well, and I guess we'll find out when some of these others come out. But it's interesting. I don't want to bring up MakerBot right now. I want to get into the next one, which is the Sculptify David, and see what people think about that. And again, if you've already got this up on a screen, the last link, go ahead and share it so that the rest of the audience can see it.
I have actually one more thing about the Dynamo 3D. I'm looking at their website, and there's no mention of, for example, Ultimaker, which is required by the Creative Commons license. And I'm not sure if there are actual files there, but it would be interesting to ask them whether they're releasing files, because it's okay to I would say to some extent to make a clone that is a direct copy, but not actually sharing your derivative is not okay.
Totally agree with that. And but, what is the slicer they're working with? Wouldn't it be funny if they're using Cura?
Well, that would be fine, but yeah, it would be also a little bit ironic.
Yes, it would be. Okay, well, let's move on to Sculptify, and if somebody has it up on the screen, if they wouldn't mind bringing it up for us. But I'll go ahead and launch into it. Who's heard about this? This kind of looks neat. It looks like a clean design, plus the important feature on it, it no longer uses filament, but it uses pellets. I said in one of our reviews it was rabbit pellets.
Little plastic pellets.
So if you move up to the top, Eric, you'll see the pellets I'm talking about.
And
I don't think you'd get good results with rabbit pellets on this.
No.
But this is definitely, a halfway step to the Holy Grail. So, it's using pellets to do the direct extruding, and it's melting them there inside the chamber. The next logical step in this would be combining this with some sort of system to directly recycle, any sort of scrap plastic you could just feed right into your machine, and then have it re-extrude as a new model.
That's exactly what it is. It's a step.
I think it's Taiwan or Korea. There's some Asian country that has actually done that. They have like a scrap bin right next to the printer, and they're working on that actual model. Steve,
Yeah,
so
and a lot of these bulk, recycling centers where they do the distribution, or they actually have the ability to make these pellets. You can buy, like a lot of the injection molding houses are sometimes built right next to a recycling center, so they can take the recycled plastic, they can sort it, because there's different tiers of quality, obviously, and then they can make the pellets and basically move the pallet next door of the pellets and manufacture plastic parts directly, because injection molding houses are the same. That they're fed pellets, these injection molding machines. They don't take filament, they take pellets. So I think essentially we're looking at economies of scale. So you're looking at a lot more pellets out there. Even the filament manufacturers are making the filament from pellets. So I mean, you have to think, okay, there's a lot more pellets out there than there are filament manufacturers. You know, there's a lot more manufacturers of the pellets. So it's probably a lot more figured out. So I think this is definitely a step in the right direction. This is, I think, where a lot of it may have or should have started. A lot of printing.
Yeah. Well, a move in the right direction. So, Steve, Brad, you want to chime in on this one, or?
Well, I was just kind of wondering about the break-even cost between buying something like a Filastrutor and buying pellets off of eBay and making my own filament, you know?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that FFF printing is already problematic enough for people that adding an extra layer of complexity on top of it is probably not a great thing from a support perspective. I wouldn't say that filament is extraordinarily expensive at the moment. And I think another issue you're going to have with, I think if you're making filament or using virgin pellets, that's one thing. As far as recycling already extruded prints, a lot of these plastics aren't intended to be melted more than once, so you might run into even more issues with that. I mean, it's like a really good idea, but is it worth my time? I don't know.
Yeah, Eric, if you scroll down, there's some other neat features on this particular printer. I think they use a different type of a metal bed, and I think the precision is fairly decent. I think it's either fully enclosed or the front is open. But I mean, there's some nice FDM type features on this version. And the other thing is, might want to tune in next week. We actually do an interview with the CEO on Tuesday at 8:30. So if you're early birds on the West Coast, tune in. We'll be drinking our coffee. But if you want to know more about it, then we'll talk about this. Some of the questions we have.
And Eric, I have a question for Eric from Ultimaker. So have you guys because you guys are really in the FFF world, have you guys experimented with making your own filament from pellets at all?
Well, we have actually one of those early Kickstarter projects, and I think it's a Filastrutor, but it was really hard to get good consistency out of it. But that's also because you need a spooling mechanism, and when I played with it, there was no really good design for a spooling mechanism. But making filaments becomes easier, and I think if you create your own filament, you separate the problem into two steps. So first you start to get a more reliable filament, and then you can extrude it with a proven method. So I would say that the Sculptify 3D printer is really useful for quick experimentation and trying a lot of different materials. It would be really a great accomplishment if they get it as reliable as when you use a regular filament. Also because it's very easy if you have a large-scale process, which extruding filament is made with at this point. It's very easy to get a good consistency because you can invest in, for example, measuring the diameter and feeding that back into the system, creating a feedback loop. And so knowing exactly how much volume you're extruding is very important, and that could have been that can be solved possibly with the Sculptify printer. I'm not sure, but those things are pretty important for good quality. And also, well, I would say that if you start to mix materials, you need it to be very consistent, or you get varying characteristics throughout the part that you're printing. So that could be tricky. So I would say it's really great for experimentation, for very quickly trying out new materials or blends, because there isn't a lot of filament with, for example, blends at this point. It's either you're using nylon or you're using PLA, but no blend between the two of them, and possibly that's a very interesting thing. So I think there could be very interesting things coming out of this when this is released.
Yeah, I get a lot of requests from my engineering clients. They always are asking about glass fill. That is kind of in the material science world, much stronger plastic are the glass filled plastics. So, I know there's a lot of engineers out there that are looking to experiment 3D printing. They're additive. They're trying to experiment.
Well, I know at least a few people in the RepRap community have played with granulate extruders, but not a lot of people are actually printing with it because it's just much easier to print from filament.
Go ahead.
So for experimentation, it's really great. If you want to do production prints, it's probably easy to have the filament made for you.
Erik, you can go ahead and bounce back to your own screen.
Okay. Yeah.
I will say too, the printer, you just look at it, it seems pretty high quality as far as like the lead screws and stuff they're using. It doesn't look like a cheap printer either, so it's like an expensive printer that's going to save you money on filament. Like, I don't know if you're ever going to print that much filament, but yeah, so I think it's more along the lines of what Erik's saying, like for experimentation, like is where the value is.
Well, if you have some questions, go ahead and email me, and I'll make sure that I think his name is Clayton.
I mean, plus even like color mixturing, like you want to do a Pantone color or something, mix this many pellets and this many pellets.
That's a genius thought, yeah.
Wow, yeah. Brad, you're smart.
And you made another good point. Is making your own. Like maybe you should make, because you don't know the consistency if you're mixing and all these things. It seems like to me that it would probably be easier to just make your own filament, like Erik does, on a Fillustrator type thing that is measuring the quality all the way through to make sure that pre-nozzle, you're getting a consistent, filament diameter and all these things can be controlled if it's a completely segregated machine, and then put that filament on the machine. So.
Possibly that's better, but you do add another melt cycle. And what you also get is if you, for example, you're using PLA, when you're melting that, and it's slightly a little bit there's a water vapor in there, for example, then it becomes very brittle because it will break the chains and it will become more crystalline, I think. So the material properties will change a lot when you extrude it once, when it's still a little bit wet or there's even some moisture in the air. And so if you do that more often, then that's a problem.
Got it. Okay.
Good point.
There you go.
Well, that's the news items that I picked. So let's kind of move into the main topic. And what about HP?
Yeah.
Are they coming out with a 3D printer that's supposed to just knock socks off the printers, or is it now delayed? Anybody else did any research on this? Well, what's the scoop? I did find something, 24/7 Wall Street. I put a link out there, but I believe Forbes just had an article on it. It appears that they're not going to be releasing anything in June or July, and it looks like towards the end of the year. And then, who knows even then. Who wants to chime in first on this one? Anybody?
I'll chime in. I highly suspect that they're probably going to start off by either buying out several 3D printing companies who've actually manufactured some of the technologies already, or they're going to start investing internally in in-house research and probably pursuing something like FFF, FDM first. Or they could do DLP, SLA first. I'm not quite sure which kind of area they want to move.
I think they've said that they're going to be making an FDM. And
FDM first?
Who's the CEO of HP now? Whitman? Isn't it Whitman? She had actually kind of jumped the gun on it, and like you said, they are researching it, and I think she saw a prototype, and you know how marketers are, they jumped the gun on this one. So I do agree with you. I think they are prototype. But you know, it's funny, I was doing some searches on the web, and somebody had an image of it, but it looked a lot like a Stratasys. Stratasys.
Yeah, I mean,
actually, that's interesting that you say that, because I believe that HP was providing the print heads for some Stratasys machines. That's something I had read.
Really?
Probably for the object division.
I think that's
probably.
So.
Yeah, because it's also been the other way around. I believe that Stratasys has been the manufacturer for the design jet, which is also provided by HP. So HP has experimented a little bit with seeing if through their marketing channels or their distribution they could sell 3D printers. And I think they guessed that it was a very early stage, even in the business market. But of course the market has developed, but it's before the knee of the curve. But possibly they're also getting into it because 3D printing is something that will actually boost your stock value. So possibly that's another motivation. And I'm sure in companies like HP, they're experimenting with a lot of technologies before they get developed fully into products. I wouldn't be surprised if they have several processes or several technologies.
Yeah, I would think if I was a big corporation and I was going to enter the market and I had the resources HP did and the know-how, I would go after the PolyJet, because there's only one competitor, right? Which is Objet, So, Z Corp is really not really a PolyJet machine. It's more of like a powder. I don't know what they call it. It's kind of
it's a powder-based machine.
But PolyJet, the only real competitor, and there's not really a PolyJet machine that's per level.
Well, HP's already identified that they're not going to be coming out with a consumer version, but a business class machine.
Yeah, and knowing that they have the know-how to get in, to make print heads, and sounds like making print heads maybe for Objet, might be probably. I could see them getting into the PolyJet market.
Yeah, or the full color. I've had some ideas of somehow marrying the inkjet process, but I just read somewhere else that somebody, again in Asia, has moved forward with something like that, and has some very realistic, like they print. I think they're coming out with an SLA as well as an FDM or FFF, and then they use the inkjets to color it. So I think that'll be very unique.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
So that'll be real interesting. But the other thing that they touted in their initial press release is that their particular model was going to be much faster than anything else on the market. And I guess that kind of, as Erik made the point, great, you can move things really quick, but can you do everything else very quick? So, are they just promoting one feature that you'll never use, or there's a lot of speculation. I was hoping to have more like an actual printer now, but it doesn't look like we'll have anything.
Well, the other thing about HP is they definitely have a lot of experience in paper, right? So you could look at maybe they're working on an LOM printer. You don't know, because they can print paper, they can feed paper. They have the paper feed mechanisms. So LOM is yet another thing that I could see them.
Isn't the M-Core system based upon an HP technology as well?
I think the printer is an HP, the actual print with ink. And somebody was crunching numbers saying, "Oh, how much ink could we sell?" Definitely do it. They'll give the printer away, guaranteed. Like, oh yeah.
Right, if they could sell the ink. And that's kind of what scares me about HP going into the 3D printing business is how long is it going to be before they start selling specialty cartridges that are a couple $100s a pop?
Oh, well, that
fit their printer.
Yeah,
but actually, you only need to print on the outline. So if you make bigger objects out of paper, you only need to print the actual pigments on the outer perimeter.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of ink that you need.
Yeah, I just talked to an M-Core representative yesterday because they're still sparse and there really isn't anything in California. I'm still thinking about investing in one, but he said the whole package is about $65,000, and the color cartridges, as you mentioned, Erik, are about $700. And he says if you're printing a lot, you go through one of those cartridges in about 2 weeks. So.
Yeah, and they have this weird, I don't know if they still do, but what M-Core, they were shopping me for my company, and they have this thing where you pay a maintenance contract and they provide all your consumables for you, except for your cutting blades. So apparently they provide paper and ink. And I said to the guy, I was like, that's really weird, because then a small guy like me that's maybe using the printer once a day,
I think they changed that model.
Like I'm basically subsidizing the guy that's playing. He's printing 24/7, so I'm subsidizing, or you basically average the cost, and that's your consumable that's built into your maintenance contract. How is that fair? I don't know why you would even structure your sales that way of the machine. Like, why wouldn't you sell the machine and then sell the consumables? Why would you build this whole kind of marketing gimmick? It seems like.
I think they've changed there. Like I said, they actually had a price for their cartridges now, and you buy them depending on your use.
Yeah, I think they didn't have
but still, $700 is, as Steve was mentioning, that's going to be the steep thing for anything in this market. Has everybody seen an M-Core print? I mean,
is that the one that they had them at Staples for a while? They had some.
Not in the United States, but they had them in, I think, even in the Netherlands, if I remember correctly, or in England. But no, not here.
I've actually seen the M-Core printers. They're pretty big, and they're pretty fascinating to watch. Although you have to really look through this little window. But yeah, it's interesting because it's a hybrid process. It's a cutting process and then and spraying the inks. So I always like those kinds of processes where there are multiple steps, and it looks pretty fascinating.
Yeah, we actually saw one when we went up to San Jose in September. They had one up there, and not only is it impressive to watch, but the vibrant color on the actual print. So in the last 8 months, they've improved a lot of the processes. They've streamlined the cost of the consumables, but there's still not that many out there. And I asked the guy, I guess he's based in San Francisco, but he's Irish, because I guess this is where they're founded from. Is there any service bureaus using this? And he couldn't come up with a name yet. So that's kind of interesting.
Not yet. LabCorp, they're down in Southern California. They're our distributor, and I think they're trying to act as interim service bureau to our region of the U.S. To try to get the paper, these parts out there. The cool thing about them is they're much more vivid in color than a Z-Corp machine. I haven't seen the newest Connex 550 parts. I haven't seen any parts come off that yet. I still have been waiting to go see to go to a trade show and see the latest object prints, because I know those are supposed to be pretty good. But how are you going to compete on price with paper? I mean, when you're printing full color, and it's as strong as wood, I don't see the object really being able to compete. Unless you're doing simulated over moldings or doing multi-material prints, but for single part or like GIS maps or any of these things, I think LOM definitely a technology.
Yeah. Well, sorry that we kind of moved off on a different path and got away from HP, but the whole point is they use HP technology, so. Is this all going to come back around, and we're going to see the same things coming out of HP in the future because they supply so much to other companies? It'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. Again, even if they're not going to come out with a consumer-based product, business class printer, reasonably priced, might. So with that, let's kind of move on to our next topics. Unless Brad, if you wanted to add anything to this.
No, I mean I think that as weird as some of the technology seems, I mean the more options the better, and the layering stuff definitely is pretty interesting to watch.
You talking about the M-Core?
Yeah.
Yeah, and for our listeners out there that want to go check it out, the M-Core Iris is really the one that we're talking about in particular. The Irish company, and they do full color LOM, laminated object manufacturing.
I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, and I could see HP really breaking into this market because there is pretty much, other than M-Core, there's no active LOM printers out there right now that I know of, even though LOM is one of the first printers that's been around. One of the first types of 3D printing was LOM.
Yeah. And again, might be they're holding on to those patents and,
who knows?
And not allowing anything else to come out. So the next area is we kind of talked briefly about cool stuff that we've had over the last month, year, whatever excites you as far as from a 3D perspective. So I'll start with Steve.
Okay.
Anything cool you've seen?
Oh, anything cool I've seen?
Something you're using, an accessory, material, software.
Tell you what, come back to me on this one here. I'm going to have to think about that for a second.
Brad, you can't bring up your own machine. like
the little RP, no.
I like your fashion statement, by the way.
What? The Ringer T?
No, your headphone.
Oh, it's hurting my ear.
No, I like it that way. Leave it. Makes you.
What are some good things? I think that there's, I mean, in the FFF world, I think one of the things that I'm really happy to see is a lot of high quality USA-made PLA, and a lot of that is coming from Toner Plastics on the East Coast. A lot of people are reselling that now, so it's more and more available. I just find that it prints really well. I use it almost predominantly myself.
Send me a link and I'll add it to the notes. And I have not been using it.
Well, you might be. MakerBot used it for a while. Proto Paradigm, at least up until very recently, Maker's Tool Works. There's a number of people that resell it. A lot of people don't actually manufacture their own. Other things too. We're getting, especially with RepRap printers, we're getting to the point where the 18 mega series CPUs are kind of topping out, especially as things are getting faster print speeds, and are also doing finer step resolutions. So there's a lot of the stepper drivers are going towards 30-second steps, things like that. So there's a lot of good ARM-based controllers out there now. I think maybe even isn't the Ultimaker 2 ARM-based, or?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
But you can get a lot out of it with the good right firmware. You can get a lot out of that AVR.
Yeah.
But of course there are limits. But I would say one really cool thing that I'm excited about is that the maker of Marlin, we got him on board at Ultimaker, so he's now working for us. Erik van der Zalm.
Yeah, he's awesome.
You mean Johan?
No, Erik van der Zalm. Van der Zalm.
Oh, I thought you. How is Johan? Is it Johan Roskol?
I think he's just in Seattle, like just with people
is he
there.
Forefather of Delta? He's the forefather of the Delta movement, the whole Delta printer movement.
Oh.
And I thought he, for some reason, was involved in the Marlin firmware or something.
He has modified it somewhat for the Delta, adding Delta to it, and doing some auto bed leveling. So he's like Marlin it's an open source, it's on GitHub. Anybody can submit contributions to it. Right. So he's been pretty heavy in that. That's another guy that's just super smart. Somebody needs to hire him.
Oh yeah, well a lot of people are, or quite a few people are, and I would love to have him on the show one of these days. He's just, he is an inspiration. He's always coming up with some cool little idea. He had some linear ball railing thing. Did you see that? The Delrin balls, and
it's pretty. I mean, it's not super practical, but it's super cool.
It's thinking outside the box. He's thinking outside the box and thinking about like how to apply something that maybe is already in practice somewhere else in the manufacturing world, and then bringing it to the kind of open source movement. You know.
Another thing I want to see so there's a guy, I forget, the guy that did the Simpson printer, and this guy just comes out with these crazy off-the-wall RepRap machines, but he has a Core, instead of a Core XY machine, it's a Core XZ machine, and that thing's crazy looking too. But when I was talking about the controllers, you got things like smoothie boards, which are getting some more traction, and they have really cool kind of modular systems, so they'll be more extensible for like laser cutters and things like that, or other additional types of technology products you want.
But I have a smoothie board. I haven't put it into a project yet because I don't really know how. It's a little over the head as far as I went through some of the docs that they have on Smoothieware. It's smoothieware.org, I think.
And for a while they weren't super fleshed out. So.
Right. Yeah, and but I supported them on Kickstarter because we need more people like them, and more people developing hardware other than Arduino. Because Arduino is great. I mean, you can't argue that they've just really jump-started this whole open source movement or open hardware movement, into where it is today. But we are kind of putting all our eggs in one basket when we have just the Arduino. So,
well, it's a more and more commercialized, less open basket as time goes on too. I mean, they're basically Atmel now.
Right. Yeah. So. But yeah, so I guess I could talk about my cool 3D stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, well, one of my favorites that's been in the last couple weeks is my buddy Mike over here. He's been working on this project. Can we say the name?
Sure.
It's called Four Eyes, and it's a it's for the structure I/O, or the accessory that goes onto your iPad for scanning. Mike has this really nifty kind of adapter that goes over the structure I/O and adds lenses, high quality, high fidelity lenses, and makes your scans even more basically high resolution.
Yeah, I think we get about the quality of those nice $10,000 hand scanners, and I've been working with that and also making brackets so you can use an iPhone or an iPod. So this thing is, in my opinion, I'm going to be touting it as the smallest 3D scanner device out there when we get done with it.
It's pretty cool, and his scans that are coming off of it. If you haven't had a chance, go to his Sketchfab account. It's
Emmy Balzer
Sketchfab account, and you can see some of these scans are just unbelievable. Full color scans that are just, they'll blow you away for as much money as he spent. I mean, maybe $600.
$600 for the whole thing.
For the whole kit,
Okay.
and you can, I mean, you can go pick up a little iPod over at Costco for like $164.
$164. The $399 for the structure I/O. When they eventually become available. Right now, they're
and 3D
backordered.
Systems basically is kind of rebranded and doing a private label version of the structure I/O. They're calling it the iSense. So it's the same thing. So it's compatible with both. But Mike has a little adapter that goes on it, and it's called the Four Eyes, and it's awesome. And so that was my first cool one, and my second one obviously is the little RP. I'm just so stoked with that thing. How easy it is! It's an unbelievable little SLA printer. It's cool. I love it. I'm happy to be in the SLA world finally. You know.
Well, I mean, like I said, it's not anything new, but hopefully it's standardized and it will let people like who normally wouldn't have the time to tinker, to give them an opportunity to get into it at an affordable price.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to Steve because if it wasn't for the little SLA or the little RP. We wouldn't have found out about the software that was driving the back end of it.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
You know, it's people like you guys that make the world go around for people like us who don't have a lot of money.
And software is a lot harder than hardware, so they're like people that write open source software that's useful are like unicorns.
Well, and honestly, Erik can attest to that. You got the original developer of Cura working for you now, and I use that with 3 different printers. I really like it. I do have a question on Cura, though, and I think I asked the last time. I'm using a Castle Clear, which is a Delta printer, and it mirrors it. And I know I can use the mirror button on Cura, but it switches the plate. Is there any setting that I can do in the background so that it mirrors it without me having to use the button and visually change it in the settings? We can talk about that later, but kind of...
I haven't tried it with Delta. I know that there's a support for circular platform and origin in the center and stuff like that.
Right, and I set those settings, but for some reason...
But mirroring, I don't know. Possibly you could actually fix that in the firmware, but then possibly other software will look at it all mirrored up. But yeah.
If you swap 2 of the motors, it'll mirror it.
Yeah.
Right, but then the other software doesn't work. So.
Oh, I see. Oh, it's only in Cura that it's mirrored.
Only Cura that's having the problem, and because I also use Pro Interface or something, and I use that as well. And then Slicer is another program that I work with, and it only does it in Cura, but Cura, in my opinion, is the most polished application, and I'd rather continue using it because I get the best models out of it, and I have more control of it. Well, if you can throw that back to the developers, Erik, I'd appreciate it, and maybe come up with it. And
And I'm just thinking we have everybody here. I mean, like, we have this whole roundtable. It's just a roundtable of beautiful people, really smart, gifted people. I would love to see Ultimaker take a stab. I mean, I don't really know of any other real popularized SLA printers, like commercially viable SLA printers. I think Brad and Erik would be just a great team to work on an Ultimaker version of the SLA, the little RPer, because I think it's just another market and I think just one of those ones where it's a little earlier on than the FFF and FDM, you know, becoming popular, and there's not that many resin manufacturers out there. So it's not super saturated like the filament market
is. So what are you saying, Chris?
I'm saying these guys need to link up.
Ultimaker to buy out the little rip?
Not necessarily buy it out, but come up with an Ultimaker version of a little DLP SLA.
I think there's
or
so
they could
much.
buy out my software. I'm just saying, you know.
And get Steve involved. That's what I'm saying. We have this beautiful people here.
It's international.
You know, interestingly enough, when I was here at DEF CON last year, I was talking with somebody at Ultimaker about doing an SLA-based machine.
Okay.
I don't remember who exactly it was. Older guy, gray beard.
Are we letting the cat out of the bag, Eric? Huh? Do we know something?
I mean, I don't know who that would be, but or there are always rumors, of course.
We'll start now. What's
we
that?
should take it into consideration.
SLAer? I heard about that on, what was it, All Things 3D?
I mean, I think that, I don't want to speak for Steve, but I think that Ultimaker has so much talent that they certainly don't need my help.
Well, I don't know about that. You've definitely got experience, so I mean, it's amazing. I can't believe.
Brad, you always sell yourself short.
Yeah, I can't believe one guy, you know, working in his spare time
in Santa Barbara when he should be out on the beach. No, I'm just kidding. Teasing Brad.
He's passionate.
Well, it helps to go to sleep at 2 or 3 in the morning every day.
Oh, that early?
It's tough to have a full-time job and work on a project and try and. I mean, there's so much involved, even beyond just the design. Like getting something that's like polished enough for it's a kit is. I mean, it's several fold, so it's difficult. Not difficult. It's just more time-consuming than you would imagine.
Yeah, and I've noticed with SLA printing, the difference is like with FDM, you basically have to make sure the first 3 layers print properly, you know, and adhere to the bed, and that they're adhering to each other, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. But you can see them. With SLA, there's like a little bath of resin, and you have to wait for it to like pull out of the bath before you know if it's even printing right. So you have to like wait 10 minutes or whatever before you even know if it's printing right. So that's kind of like the little challenge.
It is incredibly messy too.
Yeah, if you.
And it doesn't help that the stuff that's messy is poisonous.
Slow poison. So
Yeah.
years before you finally croak. So Steve, let's get back to you and then move on to smiles and frowns.
Sure. So things I've seen that's interesting. Well, last week I saw this project called Squint from Bot Factory, and it's basically a printed circuit board printer. So it sort of looks like a little miniature CNC machine, and you can upload different Gerber files into it, and it'll print with conductive inks. And they're also working on a little pick-and-place thing with it, so it'll actually, you can print the circuit boards out on, pieces of paper or cardboard or pretty much anything, and then have the printer actually pick and place some of the components there for you. So I believe they got the Kickstarter going right now to raise some money for it. But I spin a lot of my own circuit boards, so I would love to have something like this, you know, in-house to help me rapidly prototype some of the stuff that I've been working on.
Definitely.
Yeah, we talked about that in 3D Review last Friday, and the only thing that concerned me is that the thickness of the traces. I don't know how complicated a board that you'll be able to make with it. But I mean, if you're doing simple things, it's fine. But and plus, the fact is, it would only be a single-sided board, so you would have difficulty. So for very simple things, I think it would work great.
Yeah. So
the feature on that though that we weren't aware of is this pick and place. So yeah, I think I see that kind of neat.
That is
if
really
they can move
advanced.
forward with that, I don't know where they would put their bins for that.
Right.
Backstory: I mean, I actually developed some products back in the late '80s, early '90s in Houston. And we bought a wave solder and used a lot of the people down in that area. So, and plus we had some pick and place machines too. They were actually Mexicans, But
Actually, about pick and place, there's a very fascinating project by Tempo Automation. I think they're making a fully fledged pick and place machine right now. They actually started with already a pretty impressive demo. They used an Ultimaker with a little sucking tool on it, and they already were doing pick and place operations, and now they are making a dedicated machine. So they've used the platform of Ultimaker to bootstrap it, which is always nice to see that. But also are making a company out of that. So that could be a very affordable but also extensible platform for creating pick and placing circuit boards. So it's a very I would say low-cost way to get into it.
Send me a link, Erik, on that. And
Okay,
then
yeah.
back to the point I made. I don't want to say it was a knock. Actually, they're the best solderers that I ever had. In fact, the one guy didn't even speak much English. He actually was, what would you call him, somebody that wasn't supposed to be in the country. But he was my best
temporary resident.
And I didn't realize it until like 6 months later. And I said, "Where did such and such go?" And they just kind of, well, he had to go back. he didn't have a card. I'm thinking, damn, he was my best solderer too. So.
I think one of the problems with maybe that the Squint has to overcome is a lot of times the printed conductive inks have a real high resistance, and doesn't necessarily go well with a lot of digital electronics.
Mm-hmm.
Very good point, Brad.
Looks like Erik has something pulled up for us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this made me smile. I saw this chair that was printed. We have these meetups at the Fab Lab in Utrecht, where Ultimaker was founded, and there were actually two people who had made their own chair. This was just a little stool. It's also it was already published on Youmagine, on the 3D print repository. And then there's this chair, which is completely made out of puzzle pieces.
Oh, that's great.
So I think it's a completely parametric model, so you could even design the seat for your own best comfort shape. And then when you put together all of the pieces and you sit on it, then it becomes stronger. So then you start to mesh together very well. So they printed it out of ABS, which surprisingly they said that you could actually sit on it. It was strong enough. So yeah, I think it's a really cool print. So in the same evening, I saw two people who had their own chair. so it was pretty cool.
So did they glue the pieces together, or is it just?
These don't need to be glued, actually. They already have the right shape in there.
But obviously, some assembly is required.
Right. It's like a puzzle, like a jigsaw puzzle. You'll need a few more.
So if you're not good at it, you're not going to have much of a chair.
That is so fun.
So Chris, if I wanted to order one of those through Part 7 on your Stratasys machine, how much would that cost me?
yeah, on a Stratasys machine, you're looking at a couple thousand.
Yeah, you'd be better off buying a car and driving to IKEA for something like that.
Yeah, but I don't think they'd have a puzzle piece version of that.
That's true.
Then you could get one of my scanner systems, and then you could scan your butt, and then use that in order to create the depressions in the parametric model. And yeah.
That is a really fun idea for kids. Is a puzzle chair. Go put your chair together. Or go put this puzzle. It's like it comes boxed up like a puzzle, and it turns into a chair.
What kind of kid were you? I hated doing puzzles.
Oh, I love puzzles.
Go do a puzzle.
My grandma was a puzzle thief.
Funny, all grandmas seem to be. Okay. All right. Well, it appears that Erik started on the smiles and frowns. Erik, do you have a frown, or are you on?
Mostly smiles, actually.
Well,
but I would say there's one thing I wanted to share still. We also at the Fab Lab Protospace in Utrecht. Last time we had a workshop where we modified the Ultimakers and made them extrude chocolate. So it's a very simple syringe type of application, and you actually can use the Bowden tube. You actually pull the material, and by pulling the material, you squeeze the plunger of the syringe. So it was a pretty innovative way to do this. But actually, Joris was the guy behind it. I already did that in 2011. But it's still a very relevant and interesting hack to do. So also for this one, the files are on Youmagine.
Great. Make sure you send me a link on that one.
I'll also add that one. Yeah, sure.
I'm going to convert my Ultimaker. So I'm assuming that you're going to have to replace, this replaces the hot end, right? The syringe portion?
Well, you could actually keep everything in there, so you don't need to remove any parts. You could just put it to the side of the hot end, and then make sure that it's a little lower, and then the hot end will not be in the way. And then you could print all kinds of paste, so you could also do ceramic slurry and print out pottery or something like that.
Remember how we made the cookies for Twit?
Yeah.
I could just print out
Cookies.
We use the All Things 3 logo now.
Yeah,
pretty cool. Right?
It's not quite there, but I think people are, I think there's going to be some auxiliary benefit that somebody's going to discover. They're going to be like, oh, that's going to revolutionize food.
Yeah, well, that's. What do you have there?
Yeah, this is one also very cool thing. This is the color fab material, bronze fill, which color fab is releasing. And apparently you could produce prints like this fairly easily. You could, for example, make sure that it gets polished by either a Dremel or putting it in a little drum with some stones and some rocks, and then let the drum rotate, and then it gets you really get the bronze out, and it becomes really shiny. So that's a really cool thing as well.
That is cool. Yeah, and you said it's 80% bronze or something.
80%, yeah. Wow. It's also, I've had this filament in my hands, and it's such a heavy filament. So if you order a kilogram, then you get a very, very small amount in terms of volume. But you can still print out pretty low infill rates. It prints beautifully, actually. It's very easy to print with. So, yeah.
So make sure you send me links to all these things. And one thing I want to bring up about Erik, I can't remember it. What do you call it? The universe. But you have a site very similar to
Youmagine.
Youmagine.
Right.
That does pretty much the same thing. So give a shout out and send me a link to that so people can find somewhere else to go to besides Thingiverse to look at things. So let's move on to Brad. What puts a smile on your face besides us here?
I'm generally pretty negative. No.
Well, then give us the frowns if it's easier.
I think. Well, how about Youmagine? We'll give them another. It seems like it's getting a little bit of traction, which is good. I've seen it referenced more and more, and I mean that's the toughest part for any of these online file repositories. Is like there's a pretty steep barrier to entry. It's like so many people have to use it before it sort of catches on, and I think that they're getting a little help from Thingiverse by Thingiverse is making it worse and worse. So,
yeah, we see a lot of people migrating their content. That's right. Yeah. But there's also a lot of new people who are just signing up with Youmagine who haven't actually used Thingiverse at all. So a lot of new 3D printer users as well.
So is it just mainly Europeans, or are you finding that this has become an international site?
I should have a look at that, whether it's geographically concentrated somewhere or not. Yeah, it would be interesting to check it out. Yeah.
Wow.
At least I'm noticing that there's a very wide range of objects, either very simple ones, but also very complex ones. So, for example, there's the electrostatic spark generating machine in there, and almost all of it is printed. So it's a really fascinating thing. But also, so very functional items, and also just really beautiful designs in there. So, and we have something really cool coming up, which is integration with a parametric tool, parametric design tool, which is pretty cool.
Very neat.
Not to plug Thingiverse anymore, but this thing was kind of cool that I saw. Everybody likes jet engines, and GE published their own little like jet engine kit, which I thought was kind of cool.
I saw that the other day.
I'll have to check that out.
With a little hand crank.
Little hand crank.
So, actually, I remember when I was a kid, well, actually I wasn't a kid, I was a late teenager, it was like 78, I built a lot of plastic models, and I had depends on where you come from, Wankel or a Bunkel engine.
Yep.
You guys remember those?
Oh, yeah.
Wankel's the RX-7.
It was fully moving, and it had little lights.
I had the exact same kit. Yeah, it was a snap together and glued together Wankel engine rotary kit, and parts of it were transparent, so you could look at it, see it spinning around. Yeah.
So somebody needs to translate that into a 3D printed kit.
That would be
kind of cool.
That would be kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know what you've got there. Use app. What is it? What is this going to do?
I don't know.
Take a picture of us.
Great. Okay.
So tips and tricks.
Tips and tricks. Unless somebody else has a smile and frown, I think we kind of run out of that. So let's go on to tips and tricks. Brad, I'm going to start off with you.
Tips and tricks. I don't know. I've been printing a lot lately, and I got to say that PVA glue is saving me. If you guys have printed with PLA, you can thin out school glue with water and use that as a print surface with a heated bed, and it's, you'll never go back to blue tape.
That's all I use.
I've been hearing Garolite, a thin Garolite sheet that you can get from McMaster Carr. You use an adhesive over your borosilicate glass. This is one that I've been reading last week on the forums. Is you put a double-sided adhesive on your borosilicate glass, and then you put a Garolite sheet, super thin. And apparently that's like the print medium of choice right now. Like those Build Tech.
Yeah, I think I've got a couple of Build Techs, and they are good, but I still use glue on them, and I have no problems with it.
So thin out. So your tip is to thin out some school glue, just like Elmer's school glue.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is not a new tip, but it's kind of the consistency of like milk, basically, and you just take a paper towel and you wipe it on, and you let it dry, do like 3 or 4 layers, and then you can get 10 prints out, and then you put another layer on, let it dry. But yeah, the Build-Tech plate I would like to try. There have as far as like these fiberglass or Garolite materials, people have tried using them for a while. Some of them haven't worked particularly well, so I'd be interested in, if you said the Build-Tech works, that's pretty good.
And they work well, but the problem is if you, like on my Delta, if you don't have it completely aligned, it rams the head into and it's very soft material, so I've got all these little dimples in it, so just make sure that you don't run your pot into...
I think a lot of those materials, too, are highly insulating, so I think to get it up to temperature with ABS might be difficult.
You need to wait.
Yep. Well, not only that, you're going, obviously, since the thermistor is not on top of the layer, you may not have an accurate bed temperature as well. You know what I found, just kind of by chance, I took a heated bed, put it on top of a metal plate, so that it dissipates all the heat, and I actually print on the board itself, and it works great. Little glue, and I use that for both ABS and PLA. Nylon works great. And I use it on my MakerBot 2 because it has a plastic arm. So what happens is that the metal plate dissipates all the heat, so I don't have to worry about it melting anything. And I just run it with a standard power supply. I think it goes up to like about 80 degrees centigrade. And yeah, it was a cheap build. It cost me maybe $30 in parts plus another $10 in a 12-volt power supply, and works really good. So another option. But I use the same kind of technique with the glue stick, Brad. I put it on there, and then I use a paper towel with some moisture to kind of spread it around, kind of create a slurry, and let it dry. And I think it does the same thing, and then I don't have the ridges.
Yeah, like PVA doesn't work well for ABS, but the glue stick does generally.
Works for me. So anybody else tips, Steve?
Sure. Speaking of model smoothing here, I definitely like the way my prints come out, printing ABS on my Mental Max here. And what I've done for model smoothing, I know a lot of people have talked about using acetone for model smoothing before. So you can either dip or try to paintbrush it on, but I found some of the best results are kind of using like a vapor chamber. And I was thinking, well, what around my house can I actually use? And I had this big 1.5 gallon pickle jar that I can actually stick models in and put them on a small platform on the bottom and put the lid on and pretty much just set it out in the sun for about an hour, and the acetone vapors come up and they really smooth down the surface of the models really well.
That's an excellent idea.
So how much acetone do you put into the chamber?
Typically just about a tablespoon or two, not too much.
Just a tiny bit.
Right, and then you put the lid on the pickle jar so it just kind of circulates around in there and gets the entire surface of the model misted up.
Nice.
There's also a good technique if you want to speed up the process. You could put it on your heated belt platform.
Yeah.
So that also works well because it's better to treat the part with vapor than it is to use the actual liquid because it will very easily apply too much. And then the best way to get a really good result is to have multiple cycles because you don't want to lose too much detail. And if you cool down the part, then the part will actually be, if it's cool enough, it will condense the acetone onto it. And so there will be a very fine deposition, a very nicely spread out. That's always better than pouring it over it or something. So that might be helpful.
I'll definitely give it a try.
Yeah, I've got a question for you guys. Okay, we talk about ABS, and I think we've all heard about using, well, no, but let's talk about PLA. Everybody uses PLA. What can we do in order to smooth out PLA? I mean, I know I've got a chemical. I haven't even opened it yet because they said it's like a neuro toxin. I don't want to find myself crippled in my studio one day and can't get up. So I haven't opened the bottle. Is there any other techniques you guys could recommend?
I wonder if you've been using the same thing because I've been using tetrahydrofuran. And I've tried it myself because I didn't want any employee to use it. So because then I would be liable if they grow a third arm or something somewhere in the future.
They'll just start drooling.
Yes. So if I'm drooling, then you'll know what's happening. So anyway, that actually, I think in terms of safety rating, it's quite similar to acetone. Actually, if you have a high concentration of acetone, that is actually pretty dangerous already. And then the tetrahydrofuran is a little bit more dangerous. But in any case, you shouldn't handle the material if you don't know about how to handle it safely.
Right. Yeah. So would you recommend using the same technique of
the same thing? I think it works similar to dissolving ABS in acetone. At least I'm observing the same kind of behavior. But I'm not officially recommending any of this because you have to really know what you're doing. So.
Right.
Totally agree with you there. But is there any techniques that are safer? And I know Brad is really adamant in ensuring that you stay safe and wear gloves and everything else. But he's got a hazmat suit, I heard too. So,
buy an SLA printer. You don't need to smooth stuff.
That's right.
Okay, I have one, but I want to go back to PLA for a moment. So is there any other techniques? I'm serious about this.
Well, you could also polish it mechanically and then use, for example, a vibrating bowl and then put ceramic pellets in there, and they could polish up your model mechanically.
That's a good tip.
What's a good vibrating bowl?
Well, I've been playing with it a little bit. I'm getting not very good results, but I'm probably not using the right amplitude or something.
Well, one of the things that we have to do with SLA is agitate the alcohol after we finish our resin prints. And I've been using an ultrasonic device to do so. So I put it on. It's got a timer. I put it on like 10 minutes, and this ultrasonic bath, and I think it does a better job.
I've just started doing that, and I think it's the way to go for sure.
And you can get it on eBay for, I think it was like $30 for the one that I got, and they're really cheap. So if you're using SLA, I would highly recommend getting an ultrasonic.
Well, let me ask you guys a question. How long do you put it inside the alcohol bath for to clean off your models?
Form Labs recommends 10 minutes, and I would have to agree with them on that because I've had some models that started to warp on the edges if I kept them in too long. So that's what I've noticed. So I try to adhere to about 10 minutes. I also have created a UV laser light curing system too, so I go from that directly to my curing system. But I've just been using alcohol. Brad, at least Made Solid, recommends that you use a detergent to wipe off theirs. That just with their
so, I mean, a couple things that I've found. One, as far as the best practices, it does depend on the resin. For example, some of them are not. So, I mean, you have a number of things you can use. I mean, you could probably use methyl ethyl ketone or whatever you really wanted to, but so you've got isopropyl and acetone, and what I notice is that. I guess what was the question that you were asking me?
Well, currently, at least with the Formlabs materials, you just use alcohol and then you cure it a little longer and then you're done with it. Made Solid recommends that you use...
Okay, yeah, now I remember. So one of the problems that I had with Made Solid is their resin seems to be fairly incompatible with isopropyl alcohol. So, for example, if you... Typically, I think isopropyl to clean out vats is what people have been doing, and that's sort of the most recommended thing. I notice when I add isopropyl to a vat that has Made Solid residue in it, it tends to separate and clump. So I think that's why they recommend the water and detergent, is just because they've had, like their resin in particular, seems to have some issues with isopropyl. For Made Solid and all the other resins that I've used, I pretty much use isopropyl to clean out the vats, and I think that you'd end up having a cleaner surface with that. I do notice that the Made Solid resin is a bit more resilient and handles acetone bath pretty well, whereas some of the Made Solid resins that I use, I mean some of the Maker Juice resins, the color will start to bleach out. So, but the acetone does do a better job of getting a nice dry surface. So what I've been doing is I'll do an ultrasonic bath in isopropyl for 10 to 15 minutes, and then after I'm done with that, I'll take the part and I'll just kind of I'll run it through acetone for maybe 5 seconds, and then take it out and let it dry. And then that way I'm not bleaching any of the prints, but I'm still getting pretty much all the stuff off. And one thing too, since you know you're going to rinse it in acetone, you can use a lower quality IPA, so you can use like a 90%, which is generally like half the price at Costco, so that's useful as well.
That's a good point. Yeah, I'm actually, as we talked about, Chris said he got some at Target, and I've gotten a few there too. It's really cheap there as well, and it's 94% if I remember correctly. Or you can use Amazon, but I found it a little pricier. And you can get,
I mean, there are some resins too that, for example, Maker Juice has a casting resin, and when I find when I put that in acetone, I get fractures, stress fractures. So it's, you know, it really varies on what resin you're using, but the trick is you need to rinse your resins, whatever you're using. Just find out what works best for it.
Okay, and yeah, and since I have some casting resin from Made Solid, and if you don't get yours, I'll put some, since I have those little 4-ounce containers now, I'll send you some. One other, I guess I've been talking a lot, but the tip that I wanted to mention is, since I do a lot of PLA, I use a lot of sanding, and I don't know if it's just me, but after you sand, the texture and the color is lighter than the rest of the material. And I've been trying to figure out what can I use other than painting, and I heard that mineral spirits works to bring them back to the same level of...
And this is with PLA?
This is with PLA.
I think you might find, too, just an embossing heat gun.
Right. At least with the ABS, that works very well. Yeah.
I mean, PLA doesn't sand very well. It's kind of a gummy... It's kind of like the aluminum of the plastic world. Like it gets really gummy. So a lot of people, when they want to do sanding, they'll do a model putty to fill in the ridges and then sand it that way.
Yeah, well, I do a combination. I use fine grit, and it works pretty well, but you've got to work at it. Plus, I use some very fine jeweler's files as well. But yeah, I have to agree with you. It's not the best. And so
but you might try a heat gun.
And I do have a heat gun, and
okay.
I have worked with the heat gun. The problem is sometimes I use too much heat.
Yeah.
And I push on it, and I said, whoops, and that doesn't always... But, you know, I found that the heat gun or even hair dryer works to remove your part from your plate. Or I think we talked about using hot water as well. I think I saw that somewhere, and that works really well.
I've also used liquid air. you have these little containers of liquid air, and then if you spray it on top of it, you get this gas expansion, which draws all of the heat out, and then your part will very easily detach.
So you're cooling the part then?
Yes, to get it off the build plate.
Do you hold the can upside down and spray the liquid at it, or just the air part?
Yeah, if you want to be very quick, you can do that. But it depends a little bit. If you're using aluminum as a build plate, that's probably fine. If you're using glass, then it should be tempered glass, because otherwise you could fracture the glass very easily, which may be risky. I don't know.
And you're using this for PLA?
To get your part off. Even if it's still printing, for example, another part, then you could get the part that has been printed already off of the printer without interrupting the print.
Huh, I'll have to try that.
Yeah, because you don't want to force it mechanically. So if you can get it to just separate from the platform, you can just pull it off very easily.
Well, we're full of chock full of tips today, so I'm
thanks, guys.
Glad we got the experts on.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the final thing. I'm going to go through pretty much some of the things that I know about, and then if you've got something to add.
I actually have still one tech tip that I have prepared. if there's time for it.
I'm okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'll turn on the screen sharing as well. I would recommend if you're a little bit into programming, then this is really perfect to try out parametric design. And apart from OpenSCAD, there are now a few other kinds of solutions. One is CoffeeSCAD, the other is OpenJSCAD. And we're working on integrating them into Youmagine. So for the next release of Youmagine, there will be a special button. If you upload a file which is made in OpenJSCAD, for example, you can just press this button right here. So there's a download button here as well to actually download the file, or if you want, you could just preview it. And the cool part is that the source code there's actual source code to your physical part, and it's a pretty fascinating thing because it really enables people to collaborate on 3D models in a very different way. So you could start making modules, and other people can use those modules. So it's a powerful way to work. And also, if you want to change your model afterwards, you don't have to start all over. You could just change a few numbers, and your model becomes completely different.
Yeah,
so what we're working on is integration, so it makes it very easy to start editing this model. So you can just press edit, and then there it is, your model.
Cool.
And then you can start adapting it. So for example, change the size of this sphere, and then you could have it regenerate.
So you just modify the source code and it immediately provides the results for you. Very neat.
And then there's another way of doing this, which is a little bit of a prototype, but I made that last year. And if you don't know how to write code, this is a really good way to do it. So this essentially, it's drag and dropping code. And if you know Scratch, then you might find this familiar. So I could start from scratch because it takes only about a minute to design something very complex, actually. So let me start from scratch. You could just drag and drop shapes, for example, a cube, and then you'll see that cube. You could also change those dimensions to, for example, 40 or to 10. So now it's a regular cube, and then you could also decide to assemble a part which is a combination of several primitive shapes. And then you could also remove them from one another. So, for example, if you want to do the same thing as you've seen just now, you could just drag and drop this code. And so you don't need to know any syntax. You don't need to know how to code. You can just see the results popping up there. It's all working in 3D. So this is also a very good way to get into 3D design, because you always have watertight models. You don't need to install any software. It's free software to use. It's all based on just working from the web browser. So at least 3 projects I would recommend. I'll also add the links. So one is CoffeeSCAD, the other is OpenJSCAD, and then there's another very special link, I would say, that's the drag and drop tool. It is a prototype, but it actually allows you to design pretty complex shapes with just the mouse.
That looks wonderful. I've been using OpenSCAD for a very long time, and I think I'd definitely like to check that out after this.
Yeah, OpenSCAD is really great, but on the other hand, you do need to really install it on your computer. This is, I would say, a little bit more accessible. OpenSCAD is a lot more mature, and it's developed pretty well. So
they just added a find function.
What function?
They just added the search function, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I like how you have the scratch interface. I don't remember OpenSCAD having that.
Nope.
Well,
No,
that's pretty cool, Eric. And yeah, provide me the links, and I'll make sure they're in the show notes, and I'll actually go out myself and start tinkering with it. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up really quick. Comic-Con starts today, so if you're into that kind of thing, I've got somebody who's taking a little scanner in my lens system and is going to be scanning people in cosplay outfits, so that'll be pretty cool. He wants to create a 3D environment that you can use your Oculus Rift with. So you can do a tour of Comic-Con, so we'll see how that turns out. And locally, we do a podcast, 3D Review, our 3D in Review every Friday, so if you got nothing to do in the morning at 9:30 and want to join us, you're welcome to come in and talk
Back
with
here
us.
on Google.
Yep, we'll be back on that thing. And then we've got a couple of interviews coming up. Dr. Killzone. I don't think that's his real name, but it's kind of cool, Killzone. But I found him on YouTube. He does some really good tutorials on MRI and CT scanning. So he's obviously a medical doctor, and I'm going to have him on because he's got some opinions about 3D in medicine, which has been a big topic of mine. Next week, we were supposed to see him this week. There's another doctor, Dr. McMinnon, who's been in the news. He's creating 3D printed cadavers. So for those countries that can't use cadavers, he's going that route. And he uses CT scanning and surface scanning. And I was thinking, how could he do surface scanning? And then I realized, no, his subjects probably don't move much. And let's see, finally, what else do we got? That's it for me. So if you've got any announcements that are going on in your area, Brad, you got a date for us for this little ripper of yours?
I don't.
Okay.
Well, I mean, so I'm currently doing a video and campaign assets now, so I'd like to try and finish that up this weekend. So that's kind of, I mean, it's definitely...
Need any help from us, you know, we're just right here.
Yeah, we're right up. Hey, on that note, you know, I've got my green room, so if you want to do something where you're walking around your little parts, give me a call.
I wanted to, I guess, take this time to thank Eric for coming, because it's, you know, it's rare that, I mean, there's a handful of people that are, you know, really large in this field, and he's definitely one of them, and he's definitely added a lot to FFF as for hobbyists, and even if you don't buy an Ultimaker product, a lot of people use Cura, a lot of people, I mean, tons of people use Marlin. I mean, Marlin's huge, so yeah, just, you know, thanks for...
Well, we're just lucky to have a lot of really great people working with us, so yeah.
Well, and plus you added a lot to this podcast. I came in with a lot of stuff, so. And hey, Steve, really appreciate you coming on.
Definitely.
You got anything to add?
Glad to be here.
Going on? You know, we've had you on a couple of times now, and hopefully we'll have you on again.
Look for a new version of Creation Workshop probably in about 3 weeks or so. It'll be version 25. A lot of great new features.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool.
And I want to say thanks to Steve also. Again, you know, the project that I'm working on right now wouldn't be possible without his work, and hopefully, you know, I'll have his printer out in the mail soon, and hopefully, if the campaign's successful, we'll give him some money to add some additional features. Hopefully a Pi host, but we'll see.
Well, that's definitely something I've been working on for a while. Is a Pi host and a BeagleBone, something that's sort of like Creation Workshop, but light, running in Java. So
Cool.
we'll make it happen.
Yep, very
One
good.
way or another.
Awesome.
Yeah, you're all going to get successful, and you'll just see us as these little people. Never talk to us again. So hopefully.
And I do want to say the 4-eye things that you had, the scan of Brian that you did. I mean, that's one of the first scans that I've seen somebody do where I said, this doesn't look like it came from a Kinect.
Yeah, that's what's interesting about it. It's pretty cool, and like I said, the links to Mike's models will be in the show notes after this hangout. And I just want to thank all our listeners. I hope they took away as much as I did from this, because I learned a ton.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
And
And we hope to have you guys on again sometime soon.
So again, thank you all, and we really appreciate it. And Chris, you got the last word again? No, you don't.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on All Things 3D. This is July 23rd, and we hope to see you next week.
Great. Thank you. And
Thanks, guys.
okay, there's a little picture I'll send you guys. All right. And we are leaving the call. Actually, I'm not. Hold on a second. Where's my button at? Hey, where'd it go? Sorry, guys. Hang on a moment. I'm trying to terminate the call without actually